All right, it's time. Let's talk about the divorce. So I've been away for quite a while. Let me tell you why. At this point, the case is over. I've been trying to get this divorce settled. It was a lot longer process than I thought, and I haven't talked about it in any official way up until this point. There's two different courts. There's the court of public opinion, that is Reddit, Twitter, all those great and wonderful places. And then there's the court of law, where I believed that was the best place to spend most of my time and focus most of my efforts. After it was settled, then we could talk about it. We could dispel any rumors or any sort of questions people had. And that's who this video is for. It's for people who genuinely are curious about what happened. I have documents here in front of me. I'm gonna read them as they are. I'm gonna try my best to not have any of my opinions in here. Some of these things are a bit confusing for people who don't know lawyer speak. So I'm gonna do my best to explain these documents in a more casual way. So hopefully everyone can understand them. Keep things as plain as I can. This isn't to inflame the situation or cause any stress to anybody whatsoever. I just want to speak the truth, finally. So I want to do my best to provide an accurate timeline of what happened. The divorce was filed by Malena in January of 2025. We had split up the previous year. It was amicable. We tweeted about it on Twitter. Everyone saw that. And the divorce ended up being officially filed by her in, like I said, January. I sent Malena a 50-50 offer down the middle in April of that year. She did not accept it. I did not know what she wanted out of this divorce until mediation, which was actually in November. And essentially what she wanted was the same thing she wanted in trial, and that's what we have here. I warned Malena that trial would be very expensive. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, but still we had to go to trial, and you'll see why. So bear with me now. We are gonna go into some legal documents. What I have here is what they call Nmplol Polom's First Amendment disposition of issues. So this is essentially what she wanted. I'm gonna read the document to the best of my ability because I can't read very well, but I'm gonna explain things so everyone can kind of understand what she wanted and how it went down. Keep in mind, we each had this. This one's hers, this one's mine. We'll go over mine, but first let's do hers. Hers is a bit longer. The first thing she wanted, and by the way this works is it's essentially a line with a, like for a check mark and then the thing that they wanted. So the first thing that she wanted was to grant the divorce between the parties on the grounds of insupportability. This is very important, and I'm gonna explain exactly what that means right now. In Texas, a divorce can be granted on the grounds of insupportability, which is the state's no-fault divorce ground. The Texas Family Code defines insupportability as a conflict or discord of personalities between the spouses that destroys legitimate ends of the marriage relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. In practical terms, it means neither spouse has to prove wrongdoing, no evidence of adultery, cruelty, abandonment, or other fault is required. The court only needs to find that the marriage has become unworkable and that reconciliation is not reasonably expected. So you can file divorce on other grounds, and I'll explain what those are. Cruelty. You can file for adultery, which didn't happen. Conviction of a felony, abandonment, living apart, etc. She filed on the grounds of insupportability. Next. Award Nmplol Polom a disproportionate shares of the party's estate for the following reasons, including but not limited to. So she wanted more than 50-50. Respondent's economic and financial abuse of the petitioner, respondent's failure to permit access to the party's community property accounts, including for purposes of insight and access to such community funds, benefits the innocent spouse may have derived from continuation of the marriage, disparity of earning power of the spouses and their ability to support, earning power, business opportunities, capacities, and the ability of the spouses, nature of the property involved in the division, waste, and attorney's fees to be paid. So to explain that, the judge, in order to grant Malena her disproportionate share, would have to find something that fits those sort of grounds. Any of those bullet points that I read off. Next, confirmation of Malena Nmplol's separate property as outlined in the attached spreadsheet, meaning that there's an attached spreadsheet here that has her own property in it. Makes sense. Next, order Malena Nmplol Polom's waste claim for Nicholas Michael Polom's excessive expenditures. That was over $100,000 they had claimed against me. The next thing she wanted, and this is one of the reasons why we had to go to trial, order Malena Nmplol Polom's request for post-divorce maintenance for a period of 5 years from February 1st, 2026 in the amount of $5,000 a month. So she wanted me to pay her $5,000 a month for 5 years. We don't even have kids. Next, and this was the biggest one, the most important one, and it's going to take some time to explain it because this is also why we really had to go to trial. Order Malena Midtoy Polom be granted a judgment against Nicholas Michael Polom with specific language securing such entrance against the shares and stock held by Nicholas Michael Polom with his interests in OTK Ventures, OTK Media, and Kings Gaming Labs Incorporated. So this is essentially the crux of the entire trial. I mentioned earlier that Malena wanted a disproportionate share of the estate. She wanted a 60-40 split of the entire estate, but it was a little bit more complicated than that. What she wanted to do essentially was have her 60% be all cash and my 40% be heavily weighted in my OTK shares. She wanted about 90% of the cash reserves, plus she wanted me to pay her this post-divorce maintenance, and my 40% would be essentially all in my OTK shares, which no one really knows what those are worth. This was the biggest point of contention in the trial for me. I don't think anyone would have accepted the offer that was presented in front of them. Essentially, it would drain me to 10% cash reserves, be in debt a whole bunch of money. So I would put a lot of trust in those OTK shares being worth something someday. So that is just about half of the document. And I don't know if I should say this, but now it gets kind of funny, and I'm gonna explain to you why. Up next is a section called income taxes, and let me read this for you. Order that any refunds received from the date of marriage through the date of divorce be divided equally by the parties, with Malena Midtoy being entitled to 50% and Nicholas Michael Polom being entitled to 50%. So if there was a tax refund, she would get half of it, I would get half of it. Makes sense, right? Order any liability from the date of marriage to the date of divorce be paid solely by Nicholas Polom. So if there was a tax bill, I would have to pay for all of the taxes. But if there's a refund, Malena would get half of it. Order that the parties file separate tax returns and partitions as January 1st, 2026, and each party be liable for their own respective taxes for 2026 and each awarded respective returns for 2026. Makes sense to me. Up next, injunctions. And this is where it gets a little bit confusing. I'll try my best to explain it for everyone. Order Nicholas Michael Polom be restrained and enjoined from making any public statements, whether written, verbal, or visual, regarding the ongoing litigation and the parties' divorce, unless mutually agreed upon in writing by the parties and filed within the court. So that essentially says that me, and you notice her name's not there, but me and me alone can't talk about it. And then the next line is, strictly in the event the court does not grant the requested permanent injunction, Malena Midtoy Polom requests the court after trial on the merits to grant the following permanent injunctions enjoining the parties, their agents, servants, employees, and attorneys. So pretty much everyone involved this is the following injunction. Directly or indirectly disseminating, publishing, or causing to be published, or directly or indirectly requesting a person disseminating or publishing any letter, story, statement, correspondence, description, or depiction of any kind whatsoever, including on any social media, whether fictionalized or not, which is or could be reasonably interpreted to be disparaging, negative, or defamatory in its description of the other party's personal, professional, private, or family life, including without limitation the business or the financial affairs of the other party. So essentially anyone involved with me whatsoever could not talk about this divorce. Spoiler, that did not get granted because obviously we're talking about it now. I'll explain why that didn't get granted, because essentially that's an infringement on my First Amendment right to the Constitution of the United States of America, which is freedom of speech. Malena Midtoy Polom requests the court order Nicholas Michael Polom to pay reasonable attorney's fees, expenses, and costs through trial and appeal, and a judgment should be rendered in favor of Malena Midtoy Polom against Nicholas Michael Polom and be ordered to pay directly to Malena Midtoy Polom. Malena Midtoy Polom request post-judgment interest as allowed by law. Also, it says Malena Midtoy Polom requests the court deny any and all of Nicholas Polom's requested relief filed with the court. So that's a lot. I'll explain quickly what she wanted. She wanted a 60-40 split because of her reasons listed. She wanted me to pay her $5,000 a month for 5 years. She wanted the majority of my part of the split to be locked up in my OTK shares. She wanted me not to be able to talk about the case whatsoever. She wanted the things about taxes. She also wanted me to pay her lawyer fees. So what did I want? Let's get into it. It's not going to be as long as what she wanted, so we'll keep it plain as possible. I'll read it as is, just like I did with hers. Number 1, grounds of divorce. Nicholas Michael Polom requests that the court be granted a divorce on the grounds of insupportability. There's that word again, insupportability. This is the only thing that we agreed upon. in the entire case, which is good. It really is. Next, division of community property. Nicholas Michael Polom requests that the court divide the community estate in a manner that the court deems just in right as provided by law and set out in Exhibit A attached hereto. So Exhibit A is essentially an exhibit with spreadsheets, and it ends up being a 50-50 split down the middle. Stocks, shares, cash, everything. Next, separate property. Nicholas Michael Polom requests that the court confirm and assign his separate property to Nicholas Michael Polom as set out in Exhibit A attached hereto. So my stuff is my stuff. Malena also had her stuff. Her stuff is her stuff, which makes sense to me. Next, waste and reconstitution. Nicholas Michael Polom requests the court to find that Malena Midtoy Polom has committed waste on the community and to reconstitute what ought be the actual existing value of the estate as a part of the court's just and right division of the community estate as set out in Exhibit A attached here too. So just the waste claim, essentially she had one against me, so I had one against her. I'm not trying to get into the gritty details of that. Next, attorney's fees. Order Malena Midtoy Polom pay a portion of Nicholas Michael Polom's attorney fees, expenses, and costs, rendering a judgment against Malena Midtoy Polom in favor of Kirker Davis LLP, attorneys for Nicholas Michael Polom, and order Malena Midtoy Polom to pay such a judgment directly to Stephen W. Payne and Kirker Davis LLP, who may enforce the judgment in attorney's own name with post-judgment interest as allowed by law. Attorney's fees. And then my last thing that I asked for, request for Malena Midtoy Polom. Nicholas Michael Polom requests that all relief requested by Malena Midtoy Polom be denied. So essentially what I'm asking for in this is a clean 50-50 split down the middle, just like I wanted back in April and March of 2025. What we have here is the court's ruling. This is what everyone's been waiting for, so let's just go ahead and get right into it. Dear counsel, from January 12th, 2026 to January 13th, 2026, the court presided over this case and took it under advisement. The ruling of the court is as follows. Divorce is granted on the grounds of insupportability. It's good. That's what I wanted. That's what Malena wanted. It's a no-fault divorce. Next, division of community property. 50% to Mr. Polom and 50% to Miss Polom, with the exception of King's Gaming Lab, Starforge, ordered to be split 55% to Miss Polom and 45% to Mr. Polom. The court finds that the disproportionate share of those funds are warranted due, number one, the disparity of the earning power, number two, nature of the property involved, and three, waste. So let me explain, before everyone gets all excited, what that means. I have a very small ownership in Starforge. She gets 5% more than I do, and if you do the math, it ends up being about 15K. If you remember during Malena's disposition of issues, she had asked for a 60-40 split because of things like economic and financial abuse of the petitioner. She did not get that. The community estate was essentially just 50-50 split down the middle, with the exception of Starforge, which is about a $15,000 extra towards Malena, and it makes sense to me. I will probably earn more than her going forward, and that seems pretty fair to me. Up next, and this is very, very, very important because it has to do with my shares, Nick and Nmplol are designated as constructive trustee for Miss Polom's interest. So what that means, I don't have to send her my shares. I don't have to send her cash for the shares. I will hold her shares in my name until they're sold, if and when they're sold. So that was a big, big, big deal for me. Doesn't put me in generational debt, and if they sell, they sell. Up next, attorney's fees, denied. Each party pays their own attorney's fees. Motion to seal the court records, denied. Injunctions, denied. Post-divorce maintenance, denied. That means me not being able to talk about the case was denied, and the $5,000 a month for 5 years that Malena wanted was also denied. She did not get that. Each party is to keep credit card in its debt in their own name. Each party to keep household furnishings in their possession. So all this stuff in this house is mine, all the stuff in hers is hers. Each party to keep their jewelry and personal items. So for example, that necklace that I wore, I get to keep. Pokemon card collection to be divided equally. Mr. and Mrs. Polom to each keep their own online skins. Magic the Gathering card collection to be divided equally. The Super 73 bike is awarded to Miss Polom. Each party to keep ownership of their own social media accounts. 2023 Cadillac Escalade is awarded to Miss Polom. 2021 Nissan GTR is awarded to me. So that was the court's ruling. To summarize, it was essentially the same exact offer that I had offered her back in March and April of 2025, with the exception of the extra $15K. This court case lasted well over a year. It cost over $400,000 in lawyer fees, expert fees, and in my opinion, most of it was unnecessary. But I had to go. I had no choice. If I was to continue to stream through everything, people would have been harassing me about it the entire time, like they did when I first started. And I do believe that me not streaming was the quickest way to come to a conclusion with this divorce. So there was a lot of rumors and things that kind of spawned from this case because documents were leaked and people made up their own theories and ran with them. I could sit here and diffuse all of them. It'd be pretty easy because none of them were true. But honestly, I got the ruling that I wanted, and I'm not going to do that. I might mention them on the podcast with Chance where we can do it in a less informal environment. But that's essentially kind of what happened. That's the story. That's where I've been. You know, it really does suck that things ended up this way with me and Malena. We spent well over 10 years together. It just ended up being that way. It's the road that we had to walk, and it's over. There was a whole bunch of different dramas and things that happened behind the scenes that people would find really interesting, but I'm not trying to throw any shade at anybody or at this point. If I don't have to talk about that, I won't. Speaking for me emotionally, this whole thing has been quite stressful. There's been so many things said about me that just aren't true. It was somewhat exhausting. And once I got this ruling, I literally broke down and cried. Like I was like sobbing tears, you know, that it was finally over. This actually happened back in January when we finally got the ruling. But you know, lawyer stuff, it took until last month for it to actually be over. I wish Malena and her family the best. I have no ill will towards them. Hopefully things go well for them, and I'm just ready to get back to work. I want to give this another try, see if I can still do it. So that's the summary. Again, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Thanks for watching, and fuck you. There's only one winner when it comes to divorce court. It's the lawyers, because they're walking away with $400,000 of me and Malena's money, and they could not give two fucks about us.